I'm Dr. Delroy Hall. I've been a therapist now for over 30 years, also lecturer, also I'm a trainer. And my interest in trauma, intergenerational trauma, one is from my own community, when I've watched and seen behaviour of Caribbean men in particular, right from the time I was a teenager, being heavily sedated, given lots of drugs, and I actually called them at the time, they just walk like zombies. But later on, when I did my kind of PhD thesis, looked at the use of gratuitous violence as a form of social control. If you use that for 2 or 3 centuries, what does it do to the people who've been, the receivers of that type of behaviour? So the whole thing around trauma, intergenerational trauma, it's more than an interest, it's a major concern of the damage it does to people. So that's why I'm involved in it, yeah. We know that suicide for men under the age of 45 is a concern anyway, but amongst the African Caribbean community, it's a major concern, partly because we really don't know the data. So at an instinctive, intuitive level, we know that things are going on, but we haven't got the stats. So the National Office of Statistics, they do monitor people who've taken their own lives, but they don't monitor or they keep records of African Caribbean men. As a former pastor, vicar, I've done quite a few funerals and I know of individuals who've taken their own lives, but no data, no information. So it's a concern and a challenge really, because we really don't know what's happening. But as I said, at an intuitive level, we know that things are happening, but we haven't got the specific data. The only data that we may have is what we'd call soft data. I know, for example, if I went to Sheffield and spoke to all the ministers, the black ministers, how many suicides have you kind of done? We could get anecdotally and a certain amount of individuals, so that would form some of the data, but kind of hard official evidence we haven't got at the moment. Yeah. Some of the challenges that people face are quite often cultural. Caribbean men, African men, this whole thing about this macho image. Interestingly, there was a research done at the Royal Holloway London University for 2 or 3 years. I was a part of the research in Leeds, the Leeds bit, Breaking the Silence. And one of the things that came from the research that the African Caribbean and African men said that part of the contributing factor that led to their breakdown was the macho image. It was too much energy to kind of tough it out, style it out, because I'm a man, therefore I just need to kind of keep going. But one of the things I do know, I'm not a Freudian, but a Freudian quote is, unexpressed emotions never die, they are buried alive and come forth later in uglier ways. So there's stuff around us as a people that don't deal with the emotions of things as it happens, and it has dire consequences on our health. Recently we've done some work with Sedaka and Sheffield Flourish looking at the whole thing around suicide and black men. And it's really important for targeted information because, one, I guess people kind of the majority population, if you see flyers that don't represent you, it just it does something to you. So if you have flyers that you've got images that you can relate to, you resonate with, it's really, really helpful. And also targeted. So it means that if somebody reads it and sees it, well, actually, I'm not on my own, and these are services I can actually reach out and be connected to. So it's really kind of sending out a lifeline to let individuals know, black men, look, these are services here for you, specifically designed for you to help you with difficulties and trauma and so forth. Okay. There is this whole, again, going back to the kind of macho culture, and quite often by the time we get to the services, we're really unwell. So therapy and so forth are kind of ineffective because we're so unwell. But the other thing as well, for people of faith, quite often seeking help outside the faith is seen as a sign of weakness. So then people will just kind of resort to prayer, reading the scriptures. Has its place, but actually sometimes you need professional help outside of the faith community, people who understand what happens to people who experience trauma, psychological level, emotional level. Even then I think it's a very narrow view. So there's some of the kind of challenges that people have, and again, sending out lifelines can be very helpful in just saying, look, you can connect here and we can actually help you kind of through this particular time. The project that we did with Sedaka and Sheffield Flourish, it's going at the moment, it's going really well. So we'll be signing it off towards the end of this month. So we're meeting up in about 2 weeks' time to sign it off, just to kind of tweak them. It's gone really, really well. Did it surprise me? No. I'm just used to the challenges that we are faced with, and with COVID-19 that just kind of makes it more difficult. But yeah, so nothing surprised me, no, not at all. Yeah, so I'm not saying I know everything about it, but in terms of the data and the responses, no, nothing surprised me. Yeah, one of the reasons, well, one of many reasons why the flies we're doing it's very specific, targeted, is that one, the people who are looking at it, the men who are looking at it, one, they resonate. Certainly the information is, this is for you. Quite often when African Caribbean men turn up to services, it's not appropriate. So we're making a case, look, this is for you. We understand culture, who you are, some of the struggles. So it has to be targeted other than a very generic thing. Also, what we want to do with the flyers is have local people in as images. So black guys can actually identify with people who actually live in the city, who may be quite successful now, but they've had a history of mental illness or depression or so forth. So that's kind of important for us. I think there's quite a few things we can do to help kind of reduce the number of black men taking their own life. One of them, of course, is a flyer, kind of connecting with people, resonating, having services that are appropriate. I remember reading years ago when I was an associate chaplain at a well-known hospital, I shan't say which one, a well-known hospital, that there was this talk then of the high incidence of African Caribbean men and mental illness, but they said that the research was done 30 years ago and nothing's changed. And this was in early 90s, and we're still talking about it now. So services are not being seriously changed to accommodate cultural differences. So there's certainly things that they can do. Certainly for me, I think the importance of self-love, incredibly important, not just for black men, for everybody, but certainly for black men. When you've been treated in a particular way for a long period of time, it does a lot to our brain, to our emotions, how we see ourselves. So for me, what's really important, the whole thing around self-love, how we treat ourselves, how we look after ourselves. So if you really cared for yourself, you wouldn't eat half-cooked meal or a food that's not really good for you. You'd cook a proper meal, or yeah, if you're giving something to a friend, you really look after yourself. I think one of the things that we can do, another thing, is that a lot of us as black men will spend thousands of pounds on a car, but we won't think of spending a few £100s of seeing a counsellor if we're in a crisis. The other thing as well that I would say, that counsellors are really good for prevention. So we don't have to wait till we get to a crisis. If we can see that if I carry on in this way, 6 months' time, I'm going to be hitting a crisis, you can see a counsellor to help you with some preventative strategies. Also, they'll teach you that, but also it'll cost less because you're not turned up to a counsellor in a crisis, and you can manage things a lot better. So they're just some of the few things that we can do. So if somebody's feeling suicidal, these are a few things you can do. Get on the phone to Samaritans, or in fact, email the Samaritans. You can contact SACMA. When the flyers are done, you'll have signposts where you know where to kind of go to. The Sheffield Mental Health Guide is an excellent resource for places that you can contact. So once you have these tools in place, use them. Don't wait with the crisis. Have them ready so that when the crisis occurs, you know what to do.